Well, hey there, you're on the internet, and hopefully I am too if you're seeing this. And welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink was requested that I review, and it is by Diamine Merlot. And if you've seen a couple of my other videos on inks named after wine, I actually grew up in and around San Francisco, but spent a lot of time, pretty much every summer, all summer, and yeah, increasingly in the winter now in the Sonoma/Napa wine country. So I'm familiar with wines quite a bit. Also have lived in Italy a lot, and they certainly love their wines. So when I started testing this ink, something seemed kind of off to me. It just seemed rather dark. And that's because Merlot is actually a medium-bodied wine. Syrah is actually a darker wine. Zinfandel's even a bit darker. And so as I was testing this, it made me wonder, am I crazy? Because I remembered Diamine Syrah being actually a bit dark. Not quite so dark, so I did test it. Just these little swatches. And as you can see, Syrah is actually lighter than Merlot. The inks anyway. But the actual wine, you'd have to invert that. However, both are very evocative of wine colors. I just think they should, for accuracy's sake, maybe switch the names up a little bit. So, yep. Oh, you know what? For fun, let's start with the resistance test. Now, as you can see, water broke it up a good bit, but as you might be able to see, there is some gray under there. So there was something sort of at the heart of it that it didn't really want to wash off. 1/3 bleach solution made it turn kind of purple, which was fascinating, but it didn't fully get rid of it. That was a little weird. The ammonia pen flush really broke it up. I doubt this is going to show up on camera, but actually the line for where the initial ink smear was actually only ended right about here. So all of this is it getting broken up. Now you do see a little bit of something there, but nothing else broke it up quite as well. Hydrogen peroxide really got it moving, but I still think ammonia pen flush did a bit better, so yeah. Alright, now the two pens I used were these. For some reason I felt like being matchy-matchy. So this is a red JinHao X450. And I generally love my X450s because pretty much all of them have been pretty broad and pretty wet, and this one most certainly is. So that was sort of my pushing it pen, and this one is a Nemosine Singularity, and it actually has a kind of medium-sized stub. It's a 0.8 stub, and as you can probably tell, since you can't see through those tines, it's pretty dry writing. So this is my more going easy on it. Alright. You know what? Let's do chromatography. Now, here's how you're supposed to do the chromatography, is this one. You can see that there is this, it's almost like a slate lavender. It's lightly purple, but it's definitely got a lot of gray in it. There's something at the bottom that doesn't want to move. And that purple continues up a bit, and you get a bit of a gray. And then this is actually kind of a salmon color. It's a bit orangey. And then this is more red, and then it's almost a magenta right up at the top, which is kind of fascinating. And then I let it dry, which admittedly is not how you're supposed to do it. Not a lot of difference, except the dot got a bit darker, and oddly, this salmon color sort of streaks down throughout, but other than that, everything's the same. It's just sort of a slightly darker slate lavender thing. Okay, so besides that, I also wanted to see if I could find some semi-comparable inks. So here's Diamine Merlot, and here's Syrah. And again, you can see that this is it's a little more red, right? This is a little more purple. In reality, it's the other way around when we're talking about the wines. Here's Private Reserve Black Cherry, which is a bit darker, even has a bit of brown to it. It's not quite as purple, not quite as red. Here's Diamantis Black Brown, which has a lot of purple in it. However, not enough red. Diamine's Tyrian Purple, which is very wine-colored, but as you can see is a little more purple than red and a little lighter. And lastly, I have Diamantis William Shakespeare, which I really don't know what to make of. It's definitely a red, but it has some browns and it even has some hints of purple in it, but as you can see, not quite there either. So this is a fairly unique ink. Alright, so paper test, top down density Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Now this is the Sayez from that big box of Sayez that I brought back from my trip, and as the little green circles will probably let you know, something was going on, and as you can see they're mostly right along the edge, but I didn't like it. And then there was this, so to be safe I decided to retest. This from more standard notebook paper, Clairefontaine, and much more along the lines of what you would expect. Very well behaved. That's me, I put my finger in it as I was writing, so that's not natural feathering there, that's just me being a klutz. You get some very nice shading. I hope this will come through. Let's see how close I can bring this before the camera freaks out. So you get a little bit of a halo effect around the wettest parts. Later on I ended up filling, in fact it was the same pen, it was another 0.8 Singularity, and writing in Syrah on all the tests just so I could have an immediate comparison. And it is much lighter and it is more red. This one's more purple. Now the 0.8 Stub took 10 seconds to dry, but that broad and wet JinHao only took 14. And you can see, I don't know how to describe the drying process of this ink. It would like sit and then very slowly seep in, and then all of a sudden it would be completely dry. So it sat on top of the page for a while, and it was slightly wet. I'd say it's maybe a 5.5 out of 10. It just goes. It's not noticeably, you know, like, it's not really noticeably wet. It's just slightly. And the reason why I noticed it is because that Stub, it is pretty dry, it is a little reticent, and yet we got all that. Granted, it is a downstroke, but still. Now, very well behaved, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All very good in that regard. You get this really nice shading, you get a depth of color. Now, the water tests, didn't matter which pen you used, it's pretty gone. However, you'll see down here, this is the X450, you get a little bit of something remaining. It did dye the page. And you can definitely tell which lines and which dots were the X450. So once again, the more ink you put down, the more there is to remain. Now, next up is Fabriano paper. This is 85 grams per square meter. It has a bit of a texture. I love this stuff. It tends to be able to handle more troublesome inks than either Clairefontaine or Rhodia can. It's not steamroller smooth like Clairefontaine. It doesn't have the ceramic coating like Rhodia, but it's, I don't know, there's a really great sort of texture to it without feeling like you're writing on sandpaper. And it's just, it does beautifully. Again, here's Syrah. Thought I'd compare the two. And actually, you might be able to see that gold sheen in the Syrah? I was laying it on really heavy in the Merlot to try and get some sheen, but I couldn't, I don't know, I couldn't quite get it, and if I did, I'm not going to be able to get it on camera. It's very vague, but yeah, as you can see, no doubt, very lovely shading. This is an extremely rich color. It's very saturated, as you can see from the smears. You can definitely see that this one's more dry writing. This is the 0.8 Stub. It took 8 seconds to dry, but the broad and wet only took 16, which is actually quite impressive. Now I doubt I'm going to get any of this sheen on the Merlot scrubbies. Yeah, no, it doesn't want to show. Yeah, and here this is where I'm like, wait a second, Syrah isn't lighter than Merlot. But anyways, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get the sheen on this paper to show up, but no bleed, no feather, no spread. I don't think there's much echo, and if there is, it's probably mostly in the scrubby. But yeah, I just really love this halo effect that you see in some of the wetter areas. I think it's quite nice. But yeah, once again, this broad left more, and you can tell which lines and dots it was. It did dye the page. But yeah, so kind of like Syrah. Syrah behaves in much the same way. It's very saturated, takes longer to dry, slightly longer than average. Since it's dark, it can, on the darker side, it can leave an echo, but it dyes the page. That is something that Syrah does. So Merlot and Syrah definitely have that in common. Now here's Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. Yeah, pretty much more of the same. The 0.8 Stub took 6 seconds to dry. The broad and wet JinHao took 15. I was laying it on really thick because I thought maybe on here, because of the ceramic coating, I'd be able to get some of that sheen. Couldn't really get it. You know, it feels like, you know, it looks like it wants to, but I didn't want to push it much more because I didn't want it to come out the back. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread. I'd say no echo, and unfortunately no sheen. But you do get this really lovely shading. I hope this will come through. And you do get a mild halo effect. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that on camera, but still. Yeah, and actually, for some reason, this water test didn't dye the page quite as much. But yeah, again, you can tell which one the broad was, the lines and the dots. The more ink you put down, the more remains. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for bringing out sheen and shading, but also dry times, and since it's so thin, it can have a problem with some echo. But yeah, here I feel like we really see the full scope of its potential shading, because you can see sort of like how thin it can get down through here in the smear test, and also how dark it can get. It's almost black. But yeah, again, the Syrah is, you got a little bit of gold sheen on there. I don't know if it's going to show up on camera, but... And then here, what's fascinating is the sheen that's on here. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it on camera because it's almost a burgundy color sheen. It's a deep, rich red. Usually sheens are a contrasting color. This one, not so much. It's like a dark, almost black burgundy. It's fascinating. But again, since this is a very saturated ink and this paper does tend to draw out dry times, we do get a little bit of a draw out in that 0.8 stub, 9 seconds here. And that Broad and Wet JinHao took 22, which honestly, for a pen that's generally this broad and wet and this paper and an ink this saturated, I think that's actually really not bad. So yeah, the thing is, since it is so dark, you are going to get some echo. Now that is always to taste, but if you're very sensitive to it, that is something to be aware of. And I was laying it on really thick to try and get some of that sheen, so that is really more human error. The fact that it got that close, but even still, I mean, look at how much ink I was laying on there. And the fact that it still didn't come through, I feel like that says a lot for this paper. Now, this paper does love to let ink slide away when you add more water, and it kind of did. One of the advantages of that is once I soaked up the water test, it actually didn't dye the page a whole lot. So yeah. But again, you can tell in this grid which lines and dots were the broad. And the writing, there's maybe a tiny bit more, but just like all the other tests, it's a little patchy. Now for the next 3 tests, I only used the more moderate pen, the 0.8 stub, except to write the name. Now this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper, and it certainly earns the title here. Yeah, so here's what it looks like on a less absorbent paper, that 0.8 stub, and here's what it looks like here. It's definitely gotten broader. It's lost a lot of that shading. I'd say pretty much all of it. There's feathering. It's not great. Again, just a comparison. It took 1 second to dry it, which makes sense because these absorbent papers, they just draw it in, but it also causes some problems. Yeah, it's not great. Ooh, yeah, look at that Merlot. That is with the Broad and Wet JinHao, but that just shows you how much different pens can change on different papers. So, yeah. I mean, I don't think it fully came through anywhere, but, well, maybe in the broad, but still, it's reasonable. See how it's all hazy? None of it's really focused and dark. So it nearly got through, and you definitely have a ton of echo and some show-through, but nothing fully bled onto the next page, so I don't know, maybe keep that in mind. But I think it was the very moderate flow of that pen that kept it behaving so well. But yeah, because it's more absorbent paper, it probably sucked the ink in, made it harder to wash out. And that's why we have so much remaining. This really looks like that chromatography test. You see how you can see some of that salmony color, see almost magenta in parts. It did feather and explode a bit, but honestly, we have seen much, much worse. So if you had to recover that, I think you could. Next up is Mead Notebook Paper. It's very cheap. It's thinner than 20-pound copier paper. You know, you can get it at pharmacies. It's very common for students in the United States. Yeah, it's pretty woolly. It's pretty woolly on here. I'd say it feathers maybe just slightly less. You have no shading. I'd say there's not as much spread. The line doesn't look as extreme as it does there, but it does spread a little. Yeah, and here we get a lot of show-through. So, no, yeah, even the broad, it didn't fully come through. But the echo, the show-through is definitely there, but full bleed, not so much. So that's actually kind of impressive. And also, I feel like that shows just how awful that 20-pound paper is. But yeah, this is where this paper really has trouble. Adding water does terrible things. And as you can see, it really dyed the page. That is very difficult to read. The colors are separating. It's not fun. That would not be fun to try and recover. Now, lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which I have decided to keep testing. I asked last week if I should stop testing it, but I've decided I should, because when I first really started getting into fountain pens, I didn't know that there was anything better than Moleskine. I thought these are really popular notebooks, you know, like so, you know, I was familiar with like Mead Notebook Paper and 20-pound Copier Paper, and Moleskines were very prevalent. They were kind of ubiquitous, so I thought, this is just how it is, you know, you have to put up with it. I didn't know that there was anything really better out there, so I hope people who were in that situation that I was before and see these videos and realize there are better options, there are better results. That's why I'm going to keep testing it, because I want, just in case there's someone out there who doesn't know and they find my videos, I want them to be able to see the difference that different papers make. So yeah, anyways, yeah, this ink's performance on here is terrible because it's Moleskine and it's the bane of my existence. So despite it obviously being a very absorbent paper, and you can tell because it's got that wet woolly look, it took 2.5 seconds to dry. There is no shading, there is a lot of feathering. And there's some spread, not a ton, but some. And holy moly, look at that water test. I mean, you can really see that orangey, salmony color splitting off, and the near magenta and that gray at the middle, but things are starting to overlap. Even that stuff at the center is starting to feather and explode, which is not great. And look at this. Moleskine tends to be like the first one to bleed, and it kind of did. It came through. It fully came through in some spots with the stub. Not a shock that it did with the broad and wet JinHao, but still, I mean, that pen is so moderate. I mean, it's a really dry stub, and stubs are fairly well behaved because of that edge dragging the ink around. This is not good. Oh my god, look at the back. But, yeah, anyway, so there you go. There's Diamine Merlot, as requested. As someone from the wine country, I'm a little annoyed that Syrah, where is it? Yeah, that Syrah and Merlot color-wise kind of got mixed up. But they're both very pleasant wine-colored inks. This one's a little more purple, this one's a little more red, this one's a little darker, this one's a little lighter. It's actually supposed to be the other way around, but lovely inks. Great on the more robust, more premium papers. Yeah. If you have experience with this ink, please leave a comment down below. Share with people. The more knowledge there is out there, the more there is for people to learn. Yeah. For your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.